All right, 7:30, ready to call this meeting to order. First thing I want to announce is that if you're here for the public hearing, there's a sign-up sheet. If you wish to speak, you need to be on that sheet. So. Old business, approval of minutes.
Make a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion approved. Okay, next thing we got is a conditional use hearing. The purpose of the conditional use is for SDR Holdings to store hazardous materials and rail cars. The Planning Commission, the legal counsel is Dave Larson. The applicant and representative is Toby Morris. The zoning administrator is Clint Solik. The advisor for District 3 is Brian McGinnis. The zoning administrator has provided the planning commission with a notice and letter from Gavelon. The announced methods of record keeping will be written, audio, and video. And this will be an open public hearing. Everyone who wishes to speak will be allowed to do so. Has everybody got a chance to sign up on the sign-up sheet? Do we have that sign-up sheet? Thank you. We have approximately 5 people that would like to speak. And we'll set a time limit of 5 minutes. A couple things. A couple things is we have to respect each other's time. You don't have to speak for the full time. And don't allow giving time to others. Each person is accountable for what they say, no personal attacks. Keep to the merits of the case. All statements and questions shall be directed to the chairperson, which would be me. No talking or debate amongst the audience members and applicant. All statements and questions should be as factual as possible and refrain from repeating what has been said. The Planning Commission reserves the right to question any speaker. The applicant or representative will comment on the request. The order of the hearing, the applicant or representative will comment first. Those in support of the request will testify. Those opposed will then testify. Comments will then be taken from those wishing to provide additional testimony. The applicant will then have an opportunity to answer questions. Questions may originate from the audience, but must be asked of the Planning Commission, who then may ask the applicant. All other testimonies, such as petitions, written comments, maps, drawings, photos, soil information, will be made part of the hearing record. Any reference or noted by any presenter such as report or study must be immediately provided to the planning commission to be entered in the official record. If there are numerous items, then we'll have a numbering system. Okay, so I guess the applicant representative has the floor.
Motion to open.
Motion to open.
I'll make a motion to open.
A second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All against? Motion passed. Okay. You're up.
Thanks, Chairman, members of the board. Toby Morris representing the applicant today. By way of background, it's been several years, I think, since I've been before you. We're one of the original developers of what we would call Liberty Grain back in 2011 when the rail was starting first to go through. We constructed, found the partner Gavilon at that time to come in and constructed really a world-class facility of a shuttle loader, much needed area. I think when we opened up, I know Todd was up in Highmore at that time, and he said we affected his wheat bases up there, if not 12 other counties around, thus resulting to direct impact to the farmers with higher basis and more money in their pocket. Over the past couple years, focused more with rails to the future, getting that rail line going west. We love developing along the rails. I think we've got a good history of developing shuttle loaders from Miller, Highmore, or not Highmore, Tulare, Harold, and so forth. Probably have done 250, 300 million worth of projects, which resulted in direct benefit to the local economy. Over the past couple of years, and probably in the last 2 years, Chuck Jepson had approached you, one of the main developers, for a building permit. And with that came the rail car storage. And I know there was some confusion, and I'm here to apologize because there was no malice ever intended at that time of what to go in. But when the building permit said rail car storage, I wasn't hear what Chuck said, but I know Chuck can often shoot from the hip. So part of tonight is to come back and to request from you the correct zoning for hazardous materials. What is a hazardous material? And I think the condition, should we be lucky enough to receive from you, it can be restricted to certain chemicals. The only ones we're looking for is propane and butane at that time. So we're not talking nuclear waste. We're not even talking ethanol at this point. Some of the facts that will come into play I want to show you, and this has come from the UP site. 99.99% of rail hazmat shipments reach their destination without a release caused by a train accident. You will find that over-the-road trucking is 16 times more likely to have an accident than by rail. But what's really interesting is when you look at the FRA, and I don't know how many of you have dealt with the FRA, and Todd will agree to this, they make the airlines look accommodating. Their rules go back 150 years, and they, under the common carry obligation, the federal government requires railroads to transport hazmat, whether they want to or not, because it's the safest way to transport. We're not transporting here, we're storing. The other thing to remember is that the reason why to get this conditional use permit that's so important is if you go by like the airport in Sioux Falls, you'll see a lot of tanker cars that are parked there on the BN line and on their siding. You can legally store those there regardless of the permitting that's allowed within Sioux Falls. Could Dakota Southern or could they store these cars on the main line? They could, but that's not the solution. The solution is to store them outside of town and away. Tried to work with Catherine and say, hey, here's the hazmat deal. What do we need to do to make certain that we comply? What is it? I mean, it's an open book right now, and you say you need some training. There's more manuals that are needed. I know maybe she'll talk later that she's reached out in regards to what's going to be required should something go wrong. You know, you always get the common thought, what if somebody tries to shoot at one of these? Well, the research I've said or seen is if somebody shoots at it, they better have a high-grade incendiary ballistic from military. Well, if somebody has that, they're going to do something regardless. It's not a common 30-06, that's how. But there's issues tonight that we're here to resolve. We'd like to have them resolved. what I don't wanna do, and this so much has the potential to do it, is to get drugged down on the personal side. You have a letter before you from Gavilon. Gavilon used to be our partner. We exited that with them because, well, frankly, we couldn't get along. We didn't believe in the way that they treated people. And the best thing that we could do at that time, and I'm saying Chuck, who was the general manager, was they went and tried to find somebody that could carry on what our ultimate goals were, and that's to be responsible to farmers. So when we exited, Chuck hired Todd Eaton to replace it, to carry on what we would look at South Dakota values. We couldn't get along with Gavilon because they were corporate. What they have done by sending this letter in tonight, it's hypocritical. They say that they don't want to be next to any storage cars. These are their sites in Kansas and in Oklahoma. Gavilon was one of the largest commodity traders of hazmat materials. So you gotta take their letter and understand it's personal. It's a personal attack against us, and I'm sorry you as a planning and zoning are getting drugged down
Can I
into
stop you
that.
for just a second?
Yeah,
Just to now see if we see these photographs and mark them as exhibit one. And every time somebody comes, you do that.
Okay. We just received some photographs of other Gavilon. This one is Wichita, Kansas. And, need to enter these as exhibit one. Thank you.
thank you.
Sorry.
So, I'm apologizing for you getting drug into our mud. I mean, if you really look at the facility at Gavilon, they might technically violate a hazmat material when you look at the 230,000-pound tanks out there that they use for the dryer. Where do we cross the line at that? I guess I would look to it and say, where do we do development in South Dakota? How do we get development in South Dakota? I'm extremely passionate about development. Rail car storage generates revenue for the rail line. The more that revenue is generated for that rail line on movement, the more it offsets the maintenance cost, because there's a surcharge and everything that goes back. Those rails are tremendously expensive to operate. And the way that you operate them efficiently, and the way that you make it so it's more efficient for the businesses along the line, is you keep those costs low, and that's done through traffic. And so that was also part of the storage, was looking at it from that standpoint as well. Like I said, the right thing to do is to store it in there, not on the main line, wherever it may be, because I know the cars have been stored up and down the main line, probably from Kennebec back to Mount Vernon, whereas this is made to accommodate that, to hold them in a safe area. They're checked 3 to 4 times a week. The traffic that comes on the line, they reduce the speed when they carry these materials down to 10 miles per hour. It's inspected when they pick them up, it's inspected when they drop them off. It is constantly being inspected to see if there's any kind of release that are going on in the butane or on the propane side. So with that, you know, I'm not sure, Mr. Chairman, I know, like I said, I don't wanna drag you down into the mud, but I'm almost confident you're gonna share some testimony from the Huffs. I think you need to know the full case. We filed a civil lawsuit against them here this week for defamation of character, interference with business, impersonating a federal employee to the state and vice versa. There's a history in there. Like I said, I don't wanna bring it in. There's so much mud on this deal, but at the same time, you can mark that as exhibit 2.
This will be exhibit 2. It's actually a copy of the court hearing, the lawsuit.
Here's what I would ask the commission. What is the
A
solution?
motion and amended complaint.
The solution for rural development to work is development. We've had a track record with Liberty. We've had a track record selling that other land off to wheat growers to get those jobs. But when you create a drama in an area, and I know that Dakota Southern, and some of it's self-inflicted, I get that, has created drama. But it's also to the point of doing what's right so we can get jobs. I've worked with the ADMs, the Cargills, and it's amazing that they have these newsrooms where they pull stuff out that if they're looking to put a project anywhere and it looks anywhere controversial, they don't go there. That has affected this area, and it's not your fault. It is some on the Dakota Southern and some with other personal areas. It's being fixed, it's moving forward, and it's being good stewards to do that. I can personally tell you, we're working with a bird food manufacturer. Chuck had talked to you about that. He was in the business in Harold, built it up very, very well, and sold it off to a large corporation. When you create that drama, when you create a sense of anti-development, those companies go pack up their toys and go somewhere else. Now, I'm not asking you to approve this based on development. I'm asking you to approve it based on safety. What is it that Catherine, Dakota Southern, the fire chief in Kimball, what is it that can work? These are safe. We just have to have the right protocols in place. And I would leave it open for any kind of questions after that.
Okay, you said that you referred to the FRA, or Federal Railroad Association. Have they inspected the site?
I believe they do not have to inspect the storage site, but it has to be compliant to their rules. So when they're always inspecting the main line, it is compliant within that.
So how do we know what their rules are?
As far as,
Well, I suppose as far as safety and as far as, whether you're compliant with what their rules are.
there's annual inspections. I don't wanna call on Todd, cause I know he was head of the rail board, but there is a compliance check that you go through. The state goes through it, because it is their line that is leased to the Dakota Southern. If it fails any kind of inspection, you're not moving grain trains, down there at all either.
I assume this property is not subject to FRA because it's not part of the rail line.
It would be a private storage track off the main line.
So it's not subject to FRA, more than likely.
I would believe so, yes.
It's private property, not railroad property designated.
We would probably want the same safety standards
True.
in the private property as the rail line would require. I
And we
would,
would
I
need
would
to-
think that would be the appropriate way.
Then I would make sure to remember that, and when we get to the point and we put that as a condition
Absolutely.
on this, that they would comply with FRA standards. That's gonna be the fine line when we're all done, is what conditions are gonna make this work, or not work.
Another question I've got is, with regard to the probably unlikely event of a serious happening, since it's hazardous material, is it strict liability as far as the owner of the property and the caretaker of the equipment, as far as cleanup costs and things like that?
It would fall under their liability insurance. And then if you would like to be named maybe as an additional insurer, we can look at that as well.
Will there be bonding or anything like that to assure that there's money there, or,
For the deductible?
no, not for the deductible, I guess, if something happened and all of a sudden we've got a corporation that has maybe not carried their liability insurance, maybe it doesn't have their bonding, and all of a sudden they just say, well, we're gonna walk away from this thing, and they leave rural county or, whoever with, massive expenses as far as cleanup and things like that.
It's a good question.
It's,
And that's something that's easily provided and accounted for, because if they don't have insurance, I think it should be provided. We do it with a lot of other businesses in the state that may lease or rent private track.
is there gonna be a written plan as far as, safety, as far as, evacuation plans, if things discovered, those types of things?
Yeah, I didn't know if Catherine had submitted the hazmat plan that I'd sent to you.
This is the hazmat plan for the railroad, this is not the hazmat plan for the storage facility.
Yeah, and it would be duplicated for that, because
Because-
the Dakota Southern would be moving them in.
There is a lot of things that I think we will have to go over, because
Okay.
this definitely is railroad-based versus storage-based. So,
We'll probably get into that when she gets a
Absolutely.
chance.
It's a start. I mean, there's not really playbook for this to go from, as you probably researched as well, and so that's just trying to find what's the common ground between what you're looking for and what can be provided.
The storage of this butane, I take it, these cars are not on their way to any place from going past. I mean, they're there for storage only, they've been taking off of
Correct.
I mean, what I'm saying is they aren't on their way to someplace by being out here.
They can be, for a couple months. It just all depends where they may be in transit at that point in time of who needs the butane.
Well, what I'm saying is the transit probably isn't going to, if they were going someplace, they would have to go back to Mitchell to get onto a line that's
Correct.
going
Yes,
someplace.
yeah, it's
So
going east.
It's not that they're here, I take it the larger exposure is transporting these cars rather than
Not storage.
storing these cars.
Correct. And that's why the speeds are reduced to 10 miles an hour when they're on the track.
Anybody else have anything?
Does the state have any setbacks that they have mentioned about hazardous material being so far away from, you know, the fence along the interstate there?
No, I've spoken with DOT and they have no position on, or they're not taking a position on that because it is, you know, I know what you're saying and that's where the barriers were tried to put at the end. I can see conscious effort, if not maybe part of the stipulation, that maybe we have to have a grain car or something in between. It's still a long distance from the interstate to go over if you were going down east to west. You know, west to east, you'd have to cross the meridian and then some. But when I spoke with DOT, they had no restrictions to it.
Is there, I've driven by this thing and I've seen them, but I've never actually walked up to them or nothing. Is there, some kind of containment in case there is a leak?
Well, butane is a gas, and so it would,
It should still be in liquid form in those, right?
it's pressurized. And so when it that's why there's sensors or containment, I forget the name of them, but it's a gas that keeps it pressurized, and then it would leak out. And that's why they're checked 3 to 4 times a week. Same with propane.
Who checks them?
It would be part of the Dakota Southern with them.
They would check them on private property?
The companies are interrelated, and so there would either be a contract agreement between the two to check it because they are the rail, they are the experts that are moving them in and out.
I got a comment. You made the comment about how it's gonna help the county. How do you feel like it's gonna help the county on the sensitive jobs and?
Well, when you first look at maybe the taxes that go into it, rail's assessed on a linear foot. I don't know what it's currently assessed at, but it's probably anywhere between 80 cents to $1. The more traffic on the rail line, the more employees that Dakota Southern will eventually hire. I think they have a shop right now over Mount Vernon that they're looking at rehabilitating to make an engine repair shop. So there's that development that's going on. You're not gonna get a whopping 20, 30 jobs. A lot of it is the county couldn't take on 20, 30 jobs. You're gonna get the nice, good growth of 1 to 2 to 3 that are very high paying jobs. It's a skill, requires thorough background checks.
And why did you pick our area?
Picked that area mainly because I had a good working relationship with you in the past, and I know that's been tarnished a little bit. It was out of town, it was over there, it was still had an exit ability on 45, so your access from that part. You know,
Have you tried to put one in the state before?
Cars have been stored in the state on the main line, a lot of places. If you go up to the short lines north, I don't know the last time you drove on I-29, but that thing was stuffed with crude oil cars when the oil shut down out of North Dakota. I think at one time on that short line between Roberts County and I forget the other name, there probably had to be 600-700 cars.
But on storage though, there's none in the state?
On the Napa to Platte line, they're stored down there. here, they were stored. You don't really see the storage on what I would call the main line. Again, you have siding that they park it on, like I said, by the Sioux Falls Airport, that you see it there. It's a niche, it's where you park it, you have to go out and you have to get contracts and find the companies.
Is there any kind of, are you done?
No, go ahead.
Is there any kind of a number or a study that if something would drastically happen with one of these, what's the range of one of these if they was to blow up? Would it damage stuff a mile away?
You know, I would not be qualified to say. I looked at the numbers that Gavilon provided, couldn't,
0.2 of a mile.
0.2 of a mile is,
Is that what it is?
That's what, according to Gavin.
Okay.
Thinking where they're stored to interstate is less than 2/10 of a mile.
if it was a huge concern, I guess I would pose the question, why in those pictures does Gavilon have 400 or 500 of those tanker cars next to $100 million of elevators? From the research I was able to find, as well as asking the Dakota Southern, the last butane car that exploded was back in 1972. Now, could it have been later than that? It was just based on the Google search, spending hours on that. The UP put that out, that 99.99 safety record over the road is not the way to haul this. Rail is the safest way to haul and to store.
Does anybody here know the distance between that and wheat growers?
Oh, I suppose you'd be at least 3/4 of a mile by the time the way that road went all the way down was about a mile in, half mile, and then it goes on further. I mean, I'm speculating. The only way to best answer it is to get Google Maps out, so I'm not guessing.
Wheat growers was notified?
Yes. And DOT was notified and they,
Agterra.
Oh, sorry.
Ategra, I should say.
Integra.
Tegra was notified by several people.
Because I believe they've had a lot of, I mean, I would think being a fertilizer, I mean, ammonia hydroxide, or, I mean, there's a lot of chemical out there.
Right, and that's why I'm asking about the blast area, and if that would affect that building with the chemicals they have on site, would we have an even bigger problem then?
I don't know. I guess the other question would be if we only had rail cars there and they exploded, would it affect us? That's the tough part.
We don't have anything that would explode.
If,
Our basic big explosion would be our propane, 1,000 gallon
Well-
propane, or 800,000 gallon propane.
We'll ask you in a minute, you can speak.
if there were a leak discovered in these 3 times a week, 4 times a week inspections, who would rectify that? Do you have contractors that are available that would come to the site
Yes.
rather quickly to take care of the leak, or is that something that hasn't been addressed?
No, there would be a remedy for that. The bigger question is making sure the remedy fits with what Catherine would like to see for the safety.
Anybody else got any questions?
One more thing on movement of cars, is that always done during the daytime with the butanes?
You know, I would say it could go anytime, because when you get the call, they can move. It just all depends on the rail line. They can come in late at night. The rail operates 24/7.
Because when I was reading on some, is that they had specific, that it was to be moved during the daytime so that they would have sight of tracks and everything as far as the movement goes.
And that's something that can be accommodated.
Any other questions?
The Wheat Growers building is roughly 600 feet away. From the closest rail line.
Closest storage line, right?
Storage line.
Yep.
Do you have plans of capping the number of cars that would be stored at any one time?
The length of the track would cap it, I believe right now, right between maybe 3.25 or 350 if it were completely filled. It just all depends.
So you're saying that if you were contacted, then you would want to be able to store up to 350 butane cars, is that?
If it fit, more than likely, I don't think you'd ever get that contract, but I don't wanna misspeak and tell you 3.25, then a year later have it 350.
Any other questions? Do you have any more to add?
No.
If I can, I would ask the chair to ask if they do currently have public liability insurance in the limits on the policy.
You know, I don't have that with me, but I can easily provide it.
And in addition, I would also ask if they currently have a environmental cleanup bond and the amount of that bond.
I think that kind of fell under what you were asking me.
Of what you would require.
Probably has to look a bit better than what I was asking.
Yeah.
Okay, is that it?
That's it.
Okay, now anybody that wants to testify in support?
Everybody come forward at one time.
Nobody in support? Okay,
Chairman, I guess I would be on the, in support, neither in support nor against. I don't know if that fits in that or not for the city of Chamberlain. If not, I can wait till another time too and speak.
okay, your name's Chad Munsinger?
Correct.
Okay, you have 5 minutes.
Sure, and it won't take me 5. I'll be one of those generous people. Chairman, thank you, and members of the board, thank you. I'm Chad Mutzger, Mayor of the City of Chamberlain. Here, not in support and not against the project. More in a concern of what it means for the City of Chamberlain and the rail lines that go through the City of Chamberlain. And a question that we would have is, would any tanks be stored in the vicinity of the City of Chamberlain on the main line, I guess, is maybe what it would be referred to, and so on, and how that would affect the City of Chamberlain. And that's our main concern in this is if any tanks would be stored there for a day or 2 or 3 days before they get moved on to the, I guess, more long-term storage facility that we're talking about today. Like I said, we're not in support nor against the project, just wondering what it means for us as a City of Chamberlain when it comes to any possible storage of short-term, probably what it would be of in the area. So I guess my questions would be that, Chairman.
Okay, we'll ask that question then.
May I add to that, Mr. Chairman?
You're asking the question.
Are
As a
would
clarification.
any cars be stored near Chamberlain or around the area?
Legally, they can store those cars anywhere on the main line under the FRA rules. It is not the intent for them to do that, but legally, if they don't store them out in the storage facility, I don't even know, they could probably park them on the bridge, which would be the, the best thing. But as long as they're on that main line, to my interpretation of the law, they fall under the FRA guidelines, and that's why they can store anywhere on that main line, anywhere within town.
And they have been.
And that's the other reason looking for the conditional use permit. Storing on the main line is not the solution. It is not.
Is all the side track at Chamberlain, is that all owned by the railroad, or is some of that owned by private.
I can't answer that.
Road. You can park them in the middle of Kimball. It's not the right thing to do, and I'm not saying this as a threat or an ultimatum. It's not by any means like that. It's finding what the solution can be, because parking them in Chamberlain is not. It's being a good citizen, corporate citizen, and it's a very great question, valid question.
Sure, if I'm asking, is, if they're parked on the main line as you speak, is there a time limit, that maximum time limit they could be on the main line before they have to be moved on to a more long-term, or as you said, up in the northern part of the state, they might have been parked there for several months?
Correct.
Our concern comes in, I guess, Chairman, is if there is parking or storage on the main line, concern is in the Chamberlain area, the city close by, with the same concerns that Mr. Morris expressed and the board's expressed, and possibilities, and I understand it, and we surely appreciate what rail means to our area and our community and what it's done for the area. And we're a supporter of the rail line. I don't want anybody to think that the city of Chamberlain is not in support of the rail line, just a concern for our citizens, and I guess I wouldn't be doing my job as mayor if I didn't come and express a concern that if there is storage in our community, that the hope would be, if it is, it's very short term, if at all, prefer not at all, but if it is a day, 2 days, 3 days before they're moved out to a more permanent storage site. So,
Okay.
and with that being said, that either Catherine or Greg Powell or somebody at the city be aware of that there's storage down there, so we know that it's there in case the fire department needs to be notified or whatever it would be. Thank you, Chairman.
And I'm gonna kind of follow up with what he was saying. So you're saying that these things can be stored in town, and is there any kind of regulatory on that?
The FRA grants the storage on the main line, as long as you're not blocking an intersection. You notify Catherine before you come in. It's not right, but it's archaic law, and it's the FRA, and in the past they have stored it, and which led to the storage facility being built out there.
We're using the wrong word though.
Well,
Storage is not what they were here. We're
hold it,
confusing
Catherine,
the two.
I'll let you speak in a minute.
Yeah.
Okay, anybody else in support? Okay, then I guess we're gonna open it up to those opposed.
I think I'm first on the list. Alex stuff.
No, you're not,
Oh,
Sorry.
well, Toby was.
sorry.
Yeah.
Ms. Benton, you're first.
I'm not opposed. And one of the confusion is the word storage. When they were here in Chamberlain, they were on the rail line, they were not being stored. They were here, they were still hooked up, they could be moved at any time. That's not stored. There's a big difference between storage and them being on active line. So they moved up and down the rails here for months. They went to Lyman County, they came back and forth. My concern, and the LEPC's concern, and even Todd Yeaton's concern, is that we wanna know how to take care of it if and when something happens, correct? That's my biggest thing. I'm not saying don't park them there, I'm not saying this is, they have to be somewhere. We've gotta admit to that, they've gotta be somewhere. If we're going to have them at the storage facility in rural county, there's some things we have to have in place. One of the big ones is letting us know beforehand, not after the fact, so we can get ready. There's gotta be training. Todd and I have already talked about some training. We have to have, since he's the fire chief in Kimball, he'd be the first call. Something went up, his would not be the only call. His would be Kimball, the Puckwater, Chamberlain, and all around. So we need to have training. We need to have at least Kimball and the next biggest one, I think is Chamberlain, hazmat training for this. Closest hazmat team to Chamberlain is Sioux Falls. 7 hours it would take for them to get fully rolled to us. So Kimball, Chamberlain, Puckwater, White Lake, everybody would have to be ready for that if it ever happened. And chance of it ever happening is very, very slim. But we still need to be trained. That takes money, that takes hours, that takes willingness. Kimball's willing to do it because we talked about it last week. Chamberlain's willing to do it, Puckwani's willing to do it, White Lake's willing to do it. It's just a matter of cost, getting people here to train us, and then going to the next level. Hazmat awareness is the simple one, then you've got to go to the next level. And I think we at least need a couple hazmat operations. And those are classes that are going to be farther away. They don't teach those here, they're going to be going to product. So not after we do the training, then we need to do the exercising, the practice. Practice, practice, practice. My biggest concern is the location. And everybody's talking about, oh, well, this, that, the other. We've had semis go off the interstate. And that location, that far off the track, you know, off the interstate. So it's not a non-ever going to happen deal. I'm not worried about the employees. I'm not worried about somebody else coming in and doing a terroristic thing. I'm more worried about a simple vehicle accident that could cause several lives lost if things aren't done the way. This, thank you, Toby sent it to me, it's the Dakota Railway Company Hazmat Security Plan. That is not the plan for the storage facility. I need a plan for the storage facility. And that's not something they can do overnight. That's something that if you gentlemen decide to allow it to happen there, we're talking a few months process at least, don't you think, Tom?
Do we have a copy of that?
If not, you may have this. This is the railway plan, though. This is not the storage facility plan. There's a big difference.
We'll make this exhibit 3.
We have talked about, well, what can you do to keep it, because of the location, how you can make it safer for traffic going up and down. We can't just put up a giant cement wall, because whoever hits the cement wall is going to die. And then we'll get sued for having the cement wall in the way. So there's other things we're going to have to figure out something to keep the perimeter safe. Safe from oncoming traffic, safe from people walking and messing with stuff they're not supposed to mess with. Probably, it's, in this day and age, there's no reason why you couldn't have motion security cameras out there. You know, there's a lot of things that could be put up to make the storage facility safer. Is it gonna make it 100% safer? Can we guarantee it's never gonna, no one's ever going to be injured there? No, we can't. All we can do is train, practice, and plan for if it does happen. And no, I don't want them going up and down the railroad. I don't know how many times we got phone calls. They've gone anywhere from all the way past Presho and then past into close to Mitchell and back and forth while they were waiting for a place to store them. It was inevitable for it to happen. We didn't think it was going to be in Kimball, but it's there now. So if you're going to allow it to be there, we need to make sure it's safe. That's gonna just take some practice and planning. And the railroad and the storage facility need to realize we're not a bunch of hobunks. We're not totally stupid. We see the train cars coming in and they don't tell us ahead of time. That right there is one of the biggest complaints. We need to know about it before it happens.
That's fine. Thank you. Mr. Puff, you got?
Okay, thank you. Members of the board and the audience, I am Alex Huff, one of the notorious Huff brothers. Back in 1985, my brother and I incorporated the Dakota Southern Railway. We owned it up until about, in fact, October 1st, 2009, when we sold it to current owners, SDR Holding. Doing business with Dakota Southern Railway. Mike Williams and his wife Tammy at the time. As Mr. Morris pointed out, and I certainly concur, there is a lawsuit against my brother and myself originally by Mr. Williams and his wife and the railroad, claiming that we had slandered them and had interfered with their business. That's for the courts to decide. We're not going to debate that tonight. there, in my discussions with Mr. Williams, things isn't just a matter of information. Why would I have any interest in doing things that would warrant a lawsuit? And one of the things I had a real problem with was he was brought up short by the Surface Transportation Board, which is the government regulatory agency, not the Federal Railroad Administration. Surface Transportation Board also looks after pipelines and trucking companies. And he was asked how come he owned another railroad and he bought Dakota Southern and he did not ask the Surface Transportation Board for prior approval.
I have to ask a question.
Okay.
Is this pertinent to?
Yes, ultimately it is.
Okay.
Okay. Because it basically, the whole point is Mr. Williams competent? And I'm not going, and this is, I should say, that tape recording right there. Okay. And what he did was, he said he didn't have to file because I had told him he didn't have to. And then he doubled down and said that his bankers told him he didn't have to. That came as a bit of a surprise to me, since I didn't ever say that. I've had experience setting up railroads, but I never bought one. The bottom line is, I wrote a sharp letter back to the Surface Transportation Board saying I couldn't speak about the bankers, but I could certainly speak for the seller because I was the one who sold it, and I didn't say that. So, after that, we got a lawsuit. Now, the whole issue, ultimately, when you're dealing with hazardous materials, is a matter of risk management. And the spokesman here for dealing with hazards in the county has already spoken to some of that. I'm going to speak more on the physical aspect, but I'm going to hand this to you. This is a study paid for by the state, Stone Consulting Company out of Warren, Pennsylvania. They submitted the study on November 18th, 2016. They were hired by the state to look at the level of maintenance that SDR Holding / Dakota Southern Railway was, because remember, the state owns this track, including right through Chamberlain. And the state obviously is concerned, having spent a considerable amount of money to upgrade the track, that it be maintained. And under the contract, they are required to maintain it to federal standard class 2, which is good for 25 miles an hour. Now, one of the things that you may read through this at your leisure, and this incidentally is a public document. Anybody who's interested in it can get a copy by contacting the Department of Transportation up in Pierce, South Dakota. They pointed out some significant defects. I will just point out two, because they're photographs. Page 9 and page 14. Now last year on July 15th, a grain train moving at the legal 25 miles an hour went in the ditch within 2 miles of the grain elevator at Gavelon. And they piled up 15 cars.
We're at our 5 minutes, so.
Okay, all right. I'm sure that I see Mr. Morris got only 5 minutes. Here's a copy. I'll just pass it down. Look at pages 9 and 14, there's some commentary. And my point is, this wasn't done by the Huff brothers, and we didn't spend any money on it. This was the state's own concern about the maintenance on this track.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Just let me mark that as exhibit 4.
Yeah, this study turned into exhibit 4. Dick? Mr. Huff, you're next.
I'm Dick Huff, and I'm going to run through this very quickly. A point of order, you mentioned that this is addressing SDR Holding, but there's two. Are we talking both at one time? Iron Horse Development and so you've got SDR Holding, you've got Iron Horse Development, both I believe being presented by Mr. Morris.
Oh, it's the Iron Horse Edition, isn't it?
The addition still holds property for the legal description.
But are there two petitioners then?
The way we filled it out, Clint, it would be the full legal description.
It's fully, there's two lots, one's owned by SDR Holding, and one's owned by Iron.
Okay.
So we're addressing both.
It's still the same, description, it's just two lots.
Yeah, okay. There's one thing that and we're not going to recommend for or against, just like Ms. Benton has not, but there's an alternative that I want you folks to know about, and then I'll give you a document to put in your minutes. Back in May of 2016, Dakota Southern approached the State Railroad Board up in Pierre, and they asked for and got permission to install 2 switches in the main line in the area of this derailment, but just east of Gavilan. Okay, still in rural county, but the mileposts are here. Incidentally, these are railroad mileposts, not Interstate 90 mileposts. Okay. Dakota Southern requested approval, install switches and sidings for car storage entirely on state-owned property. They first asked for, the governor vetoed that. They came back and made a motion, and here it is, to install 2 switches to connect to storage sidings built on private property. Now, what we're letting you guys know is you got an alternative, and it was proposed and approved in concept by Dakota Southern, and the alternative location is not by Interstate 90, by Agtegra, by Gavilan, okay? Now, the state, when they approved that, said that motion or that request was approved with the additional restriction that hazardous materials may not be stored on the sidings without prior board approval. I think that you guys just need to know, and we're just going to suggest that one of the things you consider here is that you may want to ask the applicants to go back to this original plan. In other words, do things correctly, let the state look at it, and let you guys look at it, and let Ms. Benton look at it before any construction. So if you need to give this a number, incidentally, it's I just put it's minutes of that meeting. Item 6 is the now
Be exhibit 5.
Yeah.
It's been brought up, and certainly correctly so, that incidents don't happen often, but when they do happen, and they do, the magnitude is stupendous. When you have a pressure vessel, even if it's just full of air, and that vessel fails, what you've got is a rocket. If the vessel is full of a flammable gas, you've got a bomb. And that's the situation that you're faced with and have to consider today. Now, you asked a question about whether, about liquid and gas and so forth. The reason that LPG, liquefied petroleum gas, the reason, and Mr. Morris touched on that, the reason it's liquid is because it's held under pressure. If the vessel fails, it flashes to a gas. That is called a BLEVE, B-L-E-V-E, which is, as you can see, you already know about it, boiling liquid expanding vapor explosion. And this was an event with a single car, just one car, and it did not derail. Some years back in Arizona, there was a mistake made when the car was being emptied. What happens is these cars all have a pressure relief valve on top. That valve is there in case the pressure gets too high. It blows off gas. If you have an ignition source, the plume ignites, and that's what you see here. And then what happened is the heat, the steel tank reaches the point of failure, and that's where you have a levy. And that's what this is. And I would ask you to, for folks that might like to come up and look at it after the meeting, to have it available.
You got about
But-
15 seconds.
Pardon?
You got about 15 seconds.
Okay, this is the half the tank flying through the air, and that one, half the tank car went about a quarter of a mile, some other pieces of steel further. 12 people dead, 100 injured. So the magnitude you need to keep in mind, and we did present you with an alternative that you might like to consider. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're at 6 and 7.
So exhibit 6 and 7. Next, we got Mr. Eaton.
My name's mentioned enough, do I have to talk? Todd Yates, General Manager, Gavilon Kimball. They've referenced, Mr. Morris referenced, and I think you all have a copy, so I can pass this copy if you don't. I'm here representing the capacity this evening as the General Manager of Gavilon Grain. You'll see a letter that we did submit, was submitted by our corporate office out of Omaha. And in just a brief here, Gavilon is submitting this letter in objection to plan to store hazardous materials in rail cars and lots 3A and 2 on Iron Horse Edition in Plainfield Township. Gavilon generally objects to the use of property questioned for storage or handling of hazardous materials of any kind as would pose potential danger to our employees' property, inventory, and facility, and is incompatible with existing use of surrounding properties for agriculture and ag-related purposes. And in essence, I get Mr. Morris presented some stuff. This is fertilizer plants, different scenarios, different situations, but what we're looking at is our corporate policy is protection of our employees, protection of our facilities. And if something was to the case where there would be an unfortunate incident, there's an opportunity or chance that it could affect Gavilon. And that's what we're here stating as such.
I guess I'd have to ask, if it's in protection of your employees and your facility, according to the pictures, why are those rail cars right up next to your?
Those are things I've never seen. I'm only privy to what I have. There's every, just like Agtegra, or you can take any company that's in agribusiness or production of basically any kind, and there's going to be some hazardous materials. We all have hazardous materials in our own backyards with our propane tanks. So, I know that was mentioned as well. I mean, I don't, never been to Wichita, never been to, you said Wichita, where's the other one? Catoosa, or where's that? The other pictures?
No, I know Oklahoma.
Yeah, Oklahoma. I've never been to any of them, I guess. I don't know, but I know that you can go to any fertilizer plant, any facility, whether it's anhydrous ammonia, or whether it's ammonium nitrate, or whether it's sulfuric acid, or whatever you want to say, or the train, go by any ethanol plant, and there's issues there too. And it's going to be no different than any entity that they want to protect their employees and protect their people. And that's Gavilon's stance. If it's just for the well-being of their employees and their facilities. Whether it's more than that, I can't answer to what Mr. Morris says. That's something that's beyond anything that I have anything to do with. I don't have any part of that. I guess that's really all I've got, if I've got any questions. I've got other capacities, I'm here just as a general manager of the facility at Kimball.
Anyone else have any questions?
All right, you guys, you have a copy of this, you want a copy of this? or-
Is that
We
the
got it.
letter?
It's the same, it's the
Yeah.
letter, it's
We have
dated
copies.
from, dated Clint, actually he called you Chad, but it's Clint, it's from Brian Wanzik. Wanzik, right here, you're the corporate attorney. Thank you.
Thank you. I guess, do we have anybody else wishing to provide additional testimony?
Following this inspection, was there any maintenance done to the rail line? Does anybody know? Todd,
I'm sorry?
following this stone inspection in 2016, was there any maintenance performed on the line by Dakota Southern?
No, I'm only supposed to be here as a Gavilan general manager. If I can take a step back, because I mean, this, you know, you understand what I'm saying. I'm
But
here.
you were on the rail board also,
I was chairman of
correct?
the rail board for
Why don't you
about
change
10
to
years.
rail board capacity?
Well,
You've given your Gavilan stuff.
okay, well, I'll be
It's just
That would-
it's just information.
information only. Yeah, absolutely. We do that. We did that on the upgrades. We do that on every rail line owned by the state. We do it. And were there concerns? Sure. There are also concerns on the Britain line. There are concerns on the Sioux Valley line. There's concerns on the Napa line. There's concerns on every rail line we own, the Yale line. You'll see those FRA inspections we have on an annual basis. We also had, whenever we do an upgrade, we have geometry cars come out. We have independent inspectors come out. Were there defects? Sure. Were they remedied? Yes. There was, you follow up, and if you go and follow up beyond, they had taken care of, I think there were just a couple minor things. So yeah, we have that with every rail line, and we have that with every situation. There's things that need to be remedied. If you, kind of like when you'd go and, if you used to milk cows, you'd have a milk inspector come out first. They gotta find something.
So this stone report, did they inspect all the lines in the state? Is that?
That one came on this one
Or
particularly
was this
because of
an
the upgrade.
inspection
This
that-
was on the MRC.
This was an inspection after the upgrade of the rail, is
When
that
was it done? In May, it's,
2016, is that November 18,
We would have been-
2016?
it would have, I believe it could say on there, it went the whole length of the whole track. I guess a Huffs could answer that. I can't remember. I have a lot of stuff going on. But, in
But
my
this would
mind,
have
I have to
been,
go back.
that
and-
would have been after the upgrade was
Yeah,
complete.
go ahead, Alex.
Mr. Chairman, may I answer the question?
Yes.
Okay, speaking as an outsider now, of course. The inspection was done, this isn't the full report, but the inspection was done in early October of 2016. It's dated, this is when the report was completed in November of 2016. The derailment over by Gavilan occurred July 15th of 2017. The point that's made in this inspection called out exactly where that derailment occurred. 2016, derailment occurred 6 months later. Now, that's an issue that I would suggest you be concerned about.
Okay, I'm gonna hold things up here because, where the derailment was and what we're talking about, I think are two different things.
Can I just,
Can I do that?
if I could, just, there were deficiencies, just like there are in any situation, and we could go back to when these two gentlemen ran the railroad, and if they made a train out without derailing at all, it was a miracle.
Oh,
I
I'm
mean,
gonna
okay,
I'm gonna
but I'm
stop
just-
you right there.
Well,
I'm
I'll
gonna
quit.
stop you right there. Thank you. Okay, I think the applicant has the opportunity to answer any questions.
We,
If you're good, you're good. I mean, that's,
I would leave it as this. There's a lot of questions. I'm here looking for a solution. I don't know what the solution is, but I know the solution starts with saying, Catherine, what is it that you need from your side? What is it from the Kimball Fire Department side, the Chamberlain, the White Lake? It's meant to be as a good corporate citizen. Yes, we know there's training, there's materials, there's costs. What can we do to help offset that, pay for it? What is it that we need to provide on the insurance? You're not hearing me saying, no, we're not gonna do any of that. I'm here looking for a solution. I'm not even paid by Dakota Southern. I don't have any vested interest in it. To me, it's more my reputation, which I have at stake than anything, because I set up a lot of finance and work for a lot of governments. But it's finding that solution. And I think there's a solution in there if you're willing to look for it and find it. I purposely left Dakota Southern at home and said, I'm here looking for a solution. I need to know what it is. And I'm not saying no to anything.
that's it. Okay, is there any other questions from the audience? It must be asked to the planning commission. Then I can ask them.
Mr. Chair, Dick Huff. A quick question for Toby, if that's okay.
You need to ask me, and then I'll ask him.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
One is, this is kind of a point of order too. I see that your agenda shows for both SDR Holding Company and for Iron Horse Development, owner is Chuck Jepson. Is that correct?
Is Chuck Jepson the owner?
He's one of the owners.
One of the owners.
Yeah, it's an LLC.
Of both? Of both?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Now we need to make a motion to close the public hearing.
Make a motion to close the public hearing?
Second,
I'll second.
all in favor?
Aye.
All in favor by roll call vote.
No, you can do this by audio.
Okay. Sorry. All in favor? All against? Motion carries. Public hearing is closed. There's no additional testimony or comments may be offered except those comments in response to questions from the planning committee. Now we can openly discuss comments, concerns, facts as the board once the hearing's been closed.
We can discuss now.
Yes.
All right, I just looked at the zoning. Yeah, did you look through your zoning books? You know, there's setbacks in the counties, and we have a zoning. A lot of times it's nothing like this, but I feel like as our people come in, you know, we look at an animal confinement facility. Our setbacks are within a mile of residence or 2 miles from a town. There's no exceptions on the, there hasn't been any, so I can't believe that.
Which is, page 38, number
Yeah.
7.
That,
Okay. That's on an animal confinement.
Right, but the point is that they don't, the book is only so big, and whenever you have a planning zoning book, you can't stack it this big, but the stance of the county is that we're gonna have setbacks for something as little as an animal confinement facility. How I read the handbook, that we'd at least would have to need a setback, if not more, for a hazardous material area as we would for an animal feeding area, is my point on it. Because when you make a zoning book, you can't, nobody ever thinks in rural county, first thing you think of is goats and hogs and cattle, but then this gets brought up too. And the stance in the county is for something like that, a mile and 2 miles from a city. That's my feeling on it.
There are some houses within a mile,
Yeah.
mostly I think to the south, ain't they?
To the south.
And maybe to the west.
To the north.
Well, right, but then you'd have to add on Gavilon and Integra too.
All property owners were notified of that.
Right.
Yes.
Did you receive that?
But it's only saying residential dwelling, it's not saying commercial businesses.
I don't doubt that.
Yeah.
I mean, you're
You
gonna
know,
have to
but it's
make,
not, but you know, it's, right.
But I think that would have to be something that we'd have to change at a different time, you know, we can't go off.
We can put it as a restriction.
no, that's, I'm just saying as a conditional use, we can put in condition, I just don't understand our stance on the county as a zoning board, if we would allow some things with close to residences and some not. That's all my point is on this whole conversation. You try to go through the handbook to pick out something that you tried to elaborate with.
And we have actually done that in the past.
But you have to.
Right.
Yeah. But no, that's, because I mean, there's nothing in our handbook that has anything to do with hazardous waste or, make sure I get it right. Storage hazardous materials.
I guess I personally have a little, if the closest hazmat is Sioux Falls, and it takes them, even at the minimum, 2 hours to get here. That it could be a pretty bad situation. But on the flip side of that is, if they can store them anywhere they want, even right here in town, and there ain't nothing we can do about it, then I don't know how this changes anything. I'm surprised that there isn't some kind of regulatory on that.
You might want to ask one of the House to clarify the rules too. I think Mr. Is that the correct rule?
The rules under the FRA, Mr. Chairman, may I? The rules under the FRA, if you're going to store hazardous materials, they have to be put in a track with locks on both ends if the track has switches on both ends. You can never store hazardous materials legally on the main line itself. Side tracks, yes. If the side track is owned by the company that contains the hazardous materials and then uses them, but see, this isn't an end user situation, this is just storage. To store hazardous materials, you have to lock the track up with a special key, and no railroad employee can move those cars until such time as they are ordered out to go to their ultimate destination. The FRA fines Dakota Southern for storing cars illegally on the main line over by Kennebec. So there was some misinformation that Mr. Morris was given. You cannot store on the main line unless you take the main line out of service and lock it down. And then the cars can never be moved until they are ordered out. You basically block the main if you put cars on the main line. That's the FRA regs.
When is it determined that a car is in storage or in transit? Is there a set amount of time that a car can sit before it has to be moved, for it to be considered to be in transit? I mean, there's probably a way around the storage rule.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to quote from a Federal Railroad Administration investigative report, which answers the gentleman's question. Hazardous material rail cars are required to be moved within 48 hours. So that's, I think, maybe the answer to your question.
So if they were brought in, parked at Chamberlain, within 48 hours, you're saying they would have to be pulled to another?
They have to be moved on.
They'd have to be moved to another location.
They have to be
on the
moved
track.
on to their destination in a maximum of 48 hours.
Destination or to another place where they can sit for 48 hours?
Well, I can tell you that you could play that game maybe a couple of times. The FRA won't buy it beyond that.
I guess, my follow-up question is, who's policing this? Is it the FRA or?
No, what it should be is the local rail authority. And I stress should be because they have not.
Next question, does Dakota Southern have sidetrack that they could lock up within the city limits of Chamberlain and store butane cars?
You know, I wouldn't be in a position to say if it's operational. I would probably look to the Huffs for the first time ever to respond to that, because they know the condition of the line. There is siding. There's siding in Plankington and Kimball,
Siding in White Lake,
White Lake. You can,
siding in Kennebec?
you can break them apart. 5 cars here, 7 cars there. Not the solution.
No, I'm not thinking
No,
of
I
that.
know.
I'm not thinking of that as a, I'm thinking of that as a reason to possibly.
They could do that, yes.
Now, in your knowledge, did you know that they were supposed to be moved in 48 hours?
Based on that report, yes, there was an infraction at that time, whether they moved. What I asked was a clarification, what's moved? Is it 2 inches, is it a mile? I could never really come to that, but as Mr. Huff stated though too, you can only do that for so long. And that might be when you have a contractor and they're only coming in for a couple days and then they're going back out. Those change. I mean, there's, if I may, there's several 100,000 movement cars a month that are going on. It's almost like the airlines, but on the ground, there's just constant movement on them.
This butane, where's it come from? Does it come from North Dakota?
It comes from anywhere, from the refineries to storage to the end user that's not ready for it. Your more productive months that they use it is in winter, as an additive to the gasoline. So your heavier times, you're gonna see it from, October to January, February, then it may go back into storage from March till June or July. It constantly moves.
Is there a certain, on these cars, is there a certain, temperature that they need to be at? Or, I mean, can they be sitting out in 120 degree or 110 degree rail line sitting there? Or is there any stipulations, any of that?
The rail cars are safe at the temperature, it's not a temperature grade that you need to worry about.
Does that change the pressure in those tanks?
It's compensated by the way the tank is made. So
Okay.
that should not be one of our concerns, is temperature regulation.
Okay.
If I might, Mr. Chairman, just as a,
Yes,
if I
sir.
could extend on the question or the answer. All tank cars have a safety valve, and they self-regulate. When they
Pop
open
off.
up, they pop off. Then when the pressure is lowered, the remaining contents of the car are cooled, the safety valve snaps shut.
Right.
Now, if you wanna ask me a question, have I ever talked to someone who dealt with a safety valve that failed?
I'm sure probably all have. Anybody that has hot water heater.
So, yeah.
Any other discussions? Yes, sir.
So, if I may, so basically what before you now is, there's some site, we have a conditional use request for storage of hazardous materials on a pre-existing track, which was constructed a year ago, 2 years ago, whatever, with the understanding that it was grain cars, and now they want to add hazardous materials to that. Okay, so that's the question at hand. So it's a conditional use, and it's a permitted use. It's a conditional use in an ag district, or excuse me, in a highway commercial district is what we zone this. So we need to concentrate on the highway commercial portion. But, I'm sorry, I don't know everyone's name yet, but, the animal feeding operation, there's 2 sections, I think, in your ordinance about, it's been a while since I wrote it, but where we have performance standards. Animal feeding and trailer homes. That we call manufactured homes. Those are 2 where we have, this is what you must do to operate. And you were correct, we can't do that for every single possible use. And storage wasn't even a real use in our district, but at some point when it came through, we have the classification of unlisted uses, and it was determined that they fit, here, the commission determined at some point back before, as it was just starting out. So now, the thing to remember with conditional uses is, okay, so it's a use that's allowed with conditions. I don't care what happens, I just wanna make sure we do things right, thus the format for the public hearing and things like that. But I always said in the past, and you heard this years ago, is, unfortunately he's passed away, but I said, Monty Hall, let's make a deal. You all need to decide generally be yes or no, and then what conditions will appease parties so that we can leave here with some sort of, everyone felt that they were hurt. And that's the tricky part. So as we were going, I don't know if everyone else did, I wrote down a lot of things. Rich had a few good points, and wrote those down throughout of what I would put as conditions. And if the applicant can't meet them, too bad. Those are our rules. Well, you're a recommendation body, make sure that's clear to everybody. You are a recommendation body only. The decision falls upon the Board of Adjustment, the County Commission as Board of Adjustment. So, do you lean towards the answers? I don't want to get in trouble. Yes, because you identified it in the book as something that's probably needs to be built in this part of this district. So you start with a lean, maybe yes. But if it's pushed to no, it's no. But that's your question is, do we want it in general? And that's your overall discussion. And then at that point, what do we need to put on it to make it yay or nay? So if that, hopefully that offers some clarification.
Well, I would just add, you have one more issue to decide, and that is, have you been presented with enough information to appropriately make conditions? And if not, you can send them back for, further development of the plan.
Yes, if through your discussion you find out there's some information you want to have and they're unable to answer it, then at this point you would table it and go to the next time. The public hearing requirement has been met. We don't have to do that again. You can table this if there's not enough information to make a decision. But that's the only, really the only reason I want you to table it. Not because it's late or whatever else, it's because we, or you wanna make a decision, everyone watching, don't play that game either. So we just want to have, you know, what is the reason and what's so. So I think, and as you discuss as a board up here, I want you to know that you're safe. You're protected as a board. So if you come up and say, yes, the people are upset, it really doesn't matter. It's when you act outside the board, is when you could have issues. So at this point, the discussion should be a free-for-all right now. With everyone participating, and when it's all said and done, I should know how each one of you is gonna vote. In a perfect world, which isn't realistic, so.
And that discussion between them,
But
that discussion
Amongst the board.
amongst the
Yeah,
board,
at this stage, they're deliberating.
Well, can we put our tables together?
group work.
I guess my point, if we put a conditional, I just feel like in the county, I think it should be easier to have a hog confinement than it is to have hazardous materials. So if I feel like we need to put on a conditional use setbacks that are more stipulant than what's in the book for animal feeding. So I guess my first for conditional use would be, you guys feel that way, or do you,
And that it would be 2 miles from the city and 1 mile from the dwelling?
no, from businesses, drawings or businesses, so they,
So it's an egg. So it's setbacks.
I'm gonna go lock the door so.
I guess this is my opinion, or from what reading, you know, and I hate to say it, researching on the internet, because, you know, although I think I would read newspaper articles where cities were dealing with storage of rail cars in court cases that, or, you know, where it was actually taken to a judge for them to decide. Almost everybody agreed that once the rail cars are in the storage facility, they're relatively safe. You know, where they're not moving, where they're not, you know, where there aren't things happening with the cars. The concern is, you know, when you move them from the facility, and then, of course, the track, that they're being transported out. You know, I guess myself, I would have thought that maybe there would have been representatives from White Lake and Plankton and well, there is from Chamberlain, you know, here tonight expressing concern about butane cars rolling up and down this section of track just because they're really not going anyplace here other than to store them. You know, if Dakota Southern is going to store rail cars on sidings in Plankton and White Lake and Chamberlain and Kennebec, my opinion is they're much better off at the storage facility at Kimball with conditions. And those conditions would involve the insurance, bonding, you know, safety as far as maybe a buffer, something that would probably slow a vehicle if they were to approach that siding from an accident. I don't know. There would be a number of conditions that would have to be developed. And to be honest with you, we're not gonna develop it tonight. You know, if there is any leaning towards an approval of the facility for storage. You know, not entirely, you know, I think that I would almost lean to say no if no Dakota Southern is not gonna store any rail cars whatsoever on the rail line. Because then they would be out of the area. I don't really know as course, there's a reason for them being here, other than, I guess, profit. Yeah, that's maybe one reason. So anyways, that's my opinion, is I think it's something that we could probably do with conditions.
I guess, one of the things that I'm kinda looking at is, definitely has to be some specific hazmat plan. And, with that, some of the training, the question that or the thought that I have is that training, who pays for that? You know, the county could end up, paying a pretty good
That
chunk
would
of money.
be a condition of who pays for that.
Yes.
Right.
You could have them pay for the training, equipment, certification, whatever. A lot of times, what grain, code plans, they came in, every area fire department got grain rescue, I don't do fire at Kate, because they have the facility. Here you go, here's the training, here's everything, so it's normal to require. It's in their best interest to preserve the equipment they have and yours, so you decide what it is. You have to set a dollar amount, and what departments, what equipment, what this, and again, if they can't meet it, then, I mean, we can't buy them all brand new fire trucks, but I mean, you get to the point where they need the equipment to do their job, to handle a potential hazard, absolutely. Mandatory, you put that in there. Don't even blink an eye.
Full-time fire
Salary for the
department.
fire
New job.
chief.
Job.
Well, and that's kind of what I'm getting at, is I'm pretty particular with the county's money, and when you start putting something like this out there, you gotta have training, and when it comes down to the county's gotta pay for it, and I have a hard time with that.
I guess I'd like to see leaning toward conditional. How far is actually safe away from Interstate 90? If a car on the end went, and how far does it go? It goes 0.2 miles, I think I heard. Interstate's a little closer than that. I'd like to see that looked into.
I don't know, is to build a wall there, but I'd definitely like to see some kind of a berm or something that at least would deflect somebody coming off that interstate and then into them.
Well, after that truck last week, west Kimball, I'll tell you what, he bounced across there, he made it toward the fence and took the road.
Well, I could see, I was thinking, at least having 2 to maybe 3 empty grain cars or whatever on the interstate side at the end of them. At least you got them as buffers before they would get to butane or propane cars that they're proposing that, that the only type
If,
they want
and
to
if
store.
they did ignite, they would be farther away
Yeah,
from.
like I said, you have 3 cars, and more than likely if they did, it is an embankment up, it'd take quite a bit to take in. And if you had, was there 6 or 8 lines all the way across? If you had that many across, I don't know that they,
19.
there's 19, so if you had them as a buffer just on that interstate side, at least it would be, because, no tree is gonna be, if there is a fire, it's gonna stop the heat, they're just gonna burn up too. Concrete wall, no matter what's gonna hit that, even the trail car, train car, if they hit that, a vehicle would, kill them too, I guess, so it, but, at least it's a moving buffer. I guess they have, empty ones, I guess, just as there, but, other than.
You'd have to put a feed, I would think. You'd have to.
Well, you do either 2 or 3 train cars that would have to be, and if they weren't there, then they'd have to move them out and.
Right, but
Bring
who's gonna
everyone in.
police it?
Exactly.
Who's gonna police it?
Would something like a guardrail make more sense?
Well, I would better feed.
And that's basically what I was saying, is that either some kind of a berm or something that could at least deflect, if somebody come off that interstate.
One to remember is the conditional use rides with the land. it is not necessarily permanent. If they violate a conditional use, you say who's enforcing it, you jerk to conditional use. That's it, game over. We closed down a bar and stuff in one county, gas station, whatever, because you violated conditional use. We'll allow it to sell it to someone, otherwise you're done operating. Close the doors. So you can do that. I mean, when you set the standards, you set standards that are enforceable that you can use. Also, I'd caution you to, if you can figure out how DOT or the Corps of Engineers thinks, good luck. I mean, focus on Rural County first. And if DOT has an interest in something, they will show you, but they obviously aren't, they're not concerned. And it's crazy land if you start thinking for them or something. I know sometimes they need common sense, but you worry about the county and then let the other people take care of themselves to a point. But it's a legitimate concern. I just wouldn't waste a lot of time on it until we get maybe to the end to fine tune things, personally.
So what is a fair amount to hazmat for training?
Good question.
You don't put an amount.
No,
You list the classes we want them to take.
that's fair.
You start from the beginning and you go till the end. Recertification, everything. It's in the applicant's best interest to have this there. Don't sell yourself short, don't put a dollar amount. This is who we want trained, and if you want all 4 or 5 fire departments, for mutual aid, you know, because they're all tied together somehow, then they're tied together. Yeah, don't sell them short, just get the equipment you need, and responders, or whatever you feel is reasonable.
So who do you feel for,
You know what, who?
yeah, what communities?
Kimball, Buckwater, Rural County, White Lake, probably the Grass Ranch.
I'd put Grass Ranch, yeah.
It's not something I can give you a list of tonight, I wanna do a little research. But it'll be a list of who needs to be trained, what level they need to be trained at, what equipment, we're talking more training than equipment. We're
Right.
not talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. I can get some training done free. So, it's,
But if you need equipment, get the equipment.
yes, I'm not gonna short the county by saying we don't need this, but
Mm-hmm.
you can buy all the equipment in the world, if your people aren't trained to use it, it's not doing you any good.
No, just,
So, do we need that information before we make a decision here, or can we just say with the condition that the training is met?
Well, there's a couple ways to proceed. One is, again, your decision-making body. So you could say at some point, okay, make a motion to approve with blah, blah, blah conditions and satisfactory, agreement to address our concerns. And then once they're met, and even, we want the applicant to do this, 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 and this. We can't do 2, 3 right now, but if he does it prior to getting, allowing to start construction or activity before, in this case, before he moves the rail cars in, sure. He proves that to Clint, that everything's been met, then he can start moving rail cars. So you could start it with, conditions with contingencies, I guess you could say, if you wanna say what it is. In satisfaction with Catherine Benton's request or something. Well, that's pretty open-ended.
That's
Well,
really open-ended.
Yeah, I'm concerned about that being too vague in
Yeah, that's too vague. Or we just say, required training and necessary equipment for those departments.
We could say which hazmat level we wanted.
And just contingent, if we could have that contingent upon basically the required training of the area, of the specified departments that the emergency planning decides.
We've already started this process, so.
If I may, Chairman, we'd know before going to the county, working with Catherine, what would have to be identified, timing of it. And I appreciate the vagueness, but understand we don't have a playbook to go by. And that's,
Right, and that's kind of why I was asking that
Yeah.
question.
But I feel that's your responsibility, though.
I don't disagree.
Yeah.
But you guys do not feel that we need setbacks.
I do, because one of my main concerns here, and that's why I was asking about the blast area and, some of that was, if something would happen there, my thought is that if Agtegra is that close, the chemicals that they have on hand are now all of a sudden in the air, and we've got a bigger mess than just cleaning up after a butane tank. So that has been my thought on some of this earlier.
That is part of the training. You would be training with Agtegra and Gavilon and any other of the local agencies affected by it.
Okay, so now I go back to the other point of, I almost feel that we're leaving this awful open-ended.
You're not anywhere close to being done. You're not anywhere, you haven't even scratched the surface of this. So, I'm gonna throw out what points that were made, and then I just want y'all to think and discuss if that's something that should be included or not included, if you move forward with approval. So first we go back, Rich started it off basically, federal railroad regulations on private property. Should you require that they follow FRA regulations for safety and whatever else on that property?
Yes.
Yeah.
Something you think that would go, you wanna put that as a condition then?
Right.
Yes.
Insurance/bonding,
Yes.
what? No, I'm out of the comfort zone of bonding, insurance and so forth.
That it would be able to cover cleanup. Kind of like what Rich was saying, if by chance that company, SDR Holdings, a situation happened and they said, you know what, we're done, we can't cover this, we're out of here, and they leave us with a mess, then.
So like a reclamation bond for one,
And or property damage.
and then we gotta go to insurance. I think they're separate. I think one's a bond. Anyone who's more knowledgeable than I,
Both should be required.
and then we do the insurance.
Right.
What'd you say?
Both of them.
Yeah, I think, and then insurance, what insurance? Do we want the county name? Is that how it works? Co-named as an insured, or how does that work for insurance?
Yeah, typically they would be named as an additional insured.
Yeah, there we go, right term. For what?
Well, the bond would, you got two different issues. Do you want to explain it, Rich? or-
Well, I think there ought to be some research into
Yeah.
what are appropriate liability limits, what would be an appropriate bonding limit. I don't know if there's anything, you know, I don't know what cleanup costs would be, but I guess I don't know. That would have to be something that had to be researched.
But it's something everyone feels that they would want.
Yeah.
Hazard mitigation plan approved by your emergency manager. 10-mile-an-hour speed limit when moving cars, whether you're on the track or on private property. Maximum.
Yeah.
I believe they should be daylight hours
Oh.
for butane cars.
For daylight hours for.
Moving, yeah, the hazardous materials.
Yes.
Leave it hazardous materials. I missed that one.
So we make this conditions for the whole county or just this area?
No, this is conditions to this specifically request. We're not rewriting the book,
Yeah.
we're just writing stuff just for this request today.
Right.
And if another one comes along, we'll be ready. But I don't think that's gonna happen, well, you never know.
But your 10 miles per hour would be just in a storage facility because you can only regulate it.
That's what exactly.
10 miles an hour would be while you're moving the cars, that would be my thinking.
It's
I
in
thought
the
you were
storage.
limited
But
on
that's
track
already-
anyhow.
That's what they run now,
No, we're talking, all we can control is the property in question.
Yeah, exactly, that's what,
Yeah.
Which you're not gonna get them in 10 miles an hour inside that yard anyway and stuff, so.
Or do you want something less? I mean, what, do you feel a safety issue?
I think the biggest safety issue he was talking about was moving them in the daylight hours.
right, but we can't regulate once they leave that area, so it's,
They can't hook up on anything in the dark.
yeah,
I mean, that's basically what you're saying.
yeah, right, good point,
Maybe you can hook up, so you can't move.
yeah.
Right. Or we can't wake up one morning and there's 50 of them there.
Safety records availability,
Why can't we say they've got to agree not to move them on the line if they want the storage facility?
you mean in the daylight?
Right.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is, and if they do, if they
No,
don't.
what I'm saying is, why can't we say to Dakota Southern, you do not move butane cars on your line unless if you want a conditional use to store those things in our facility.
You're saying daytime, yeah?
Because here's how, whatever your greater deity is, or God, here's God, here's the FRA, just a little bit below that. And I'm not kidding. Try to do anything around a railroad, you would look at a railroad run. And their power and their authority, and we are just way down here and cannot.
Okay, so we put the conditional use on there and we say if you do that, we're gonna pull it. We could pull the conditional use thing.
If they move the cars, if you put a condition on there, they move them at dark, have to move them in the daytime, and move them at night, you're in violation of conditional use.
On the storage area,
Yes.
but if they load them and store them on the main line overnight to be moved in the morning, or if they come in at night, but they're not put in the storage until morning. Cause these trains do come in sometimes at night, but they just can't put in the storage until daylight hours.
I don't believe we can regulate anything on the line, Rich.
Yeah,
In
that's
the
what
private property, and in a spirit, you know, we're allowing them to do this, hopefully they would respect no storing in the line and so forth, so on. But we have, our jurisdiction ends in this legal, in that legal description is as far as we can reach. So records of, safety records availability. I don't know how that works. Do you want the county to have access to those? As far as their inspections, what they found, just
On the property.
on the property, so anything stored on the property, so we don't have any issues of getting on access. And we can make that more specific, you know, as far as on demand. Leak notification protocol. What do you want there? You know, if they have a leak, what's the notification protocol? And that involves it actually as well as track movement or bringing cars in and out. We wanna know what the protocol is. When do we want to notice, how much do we want in advance, et cetera, et cetera. Daytime movement, I did have written down. Limit on, well, I think, and I don't know if we can figure out the math on this. You talked about, you know, stacking grain cars at the end of it. By doing so, are we already limiting butane cars? You know, there's, what'd you say, potential for 3 1/4 to 350. Do we even wanna worry about limiting it to a number because we'd have to count it? Or just, it is what it is. If they fill it with butane cars minus that 4-car buffer, if we decide to write that as a condition, we haven't done that yet. We're okay with that? Is it okay if they fill that with butane cars?
I would say, yeah, as long as that buffer's on the interstate side,
So that is-
for sure, but,
How many do you think we should have? Grain cars?
I was saying 2 to 3, but, you know, when for it, whatever we all voted, you know, agree on.
But the safety buffer would be the primary,
Yeah.
cause that would, maybe we look at it just as a safety buffer for now and see what we can come up with a plan, whether it's guardrails, berms,
Right.
okay.
Oh.
Well,
Just some sort, whether it's cars or guardrail or.
I would think it would have to be a guardrail, or I guess myself, if you were gonna store grain cars and you had to move every one of your butane cars to get your grain cars out of there, to me, that would be the
Not limit the movement.
It'd have to be some kind of safety, whether it be a guardrail or a berm or a.
yeah.
that'd be my,
There's thousands of ideas for
Right. But there just has to be some kind of a safety.
gigantic.
Mr. Chairman, if I might. And I obviously only with your permission, just to comment on buffer cars.
Okay.
Okay. Buffer cars, by their definition, shouldn't be moved. Once they're there, they're basically there,
Yeah.
just to stay there. And with the FRA regulations, you can't move the loaded butane cars out of the way to get those buffer cars out. You violated the FRA regulations if you do. So, Mr. Williams has some older cars, and he could use those as buffers. But basically, they're basically scrap metal and 8 wheels from then on, as long as there are butane cars to the north of them.
And would it be better to shorten those tracks and not have scrap heaps to look at?
I was just gonna say that. I was gonna say I'd probably prefer to have something like a guardrail or something there instead of some old dilapidated tin cars or something, you know.
They have character.
That'll be our next call, and then we can't move them because Federal Railroad Authority says you can't move them, so they have to stay there forever. I mean, do it, something to shorten the track, I guess. I think, you know, Rick said, maybe we're not gonna get through this tonight, but at least the applicant's getting some ideas here and so forth. They can, you know, let those stew overnight or a couple days and come back with what they feel would work best for them. Mutual aid training, we already covered that. Site security, somebody mentioned a few things there. Do we need to, what's there, what should we do?
There is nothing there at this point.
Is that open to the public? I mean, can I drive down there and just drive down the road and drive right into it? Or is it
Well,
gated, or?
you have to go through a couple gates to get there, but
There's a public right away there? It's too muddy to drive
too
through.
muddy. We tried to drive through tonight, couldn't get through. But there's Iron Horse Drive, you can drive straight into it. It's too muddy right now, you couldn't get through it, but
Is that on the north end of Gavilon, or was
it
that?
is on the south.
Right next to, right on the south side of exit.
I drove by there, but I'm like, I'm not opening gates, I just.
No, there's no gate on Iron Horse.
Okay.
Weird.
You guys have gates.
So there is no gates on that road?
No.
And then I guess there's two things, we've heard some concerns, and I heard it earlier, and I heard it tonight, of semis getting up there and up into that property somehow. Does that, you think, will be addressed? We're talking the buffer will take care of cars that go boom, as well as a semi hitting them, or is it a dual purpose to back them off, or what are we?
I think it would be a dual purpose deal. I mean, we get there, get 2 birds dead with one move.
Well, there, at the end of the rail line, there's already buffers there, right?
There's Red Rock.
There's piles of
And pylons over there, right?
There's some railroad ties.
What's a Red Rock for? Is that to stop the car, or what is the deal with that?
Just as a added partial buffer, leftover ballast to stop cars.
There must be a stop other than that.
Yes, there's
There's stops
some
before.
railroads or whatever built in the end.
Yeah.
Right.
Besides that.
So you actually already have that there with the guard.
Right, they just put red rock on it,
It looks better.
but I've seen the construction.
And then there were some concerns about setbacks. I mean, granted, the infrastructure's there, that doesn't mean we have to take it if you don't want to. If you wanna limit, you know, how full they get to the northeast there, I guess I would say, with cars, if you wanna leave a dead space there, in other words, don't put butane cars up to the end on the opposite, the northeast side or north side, if you wanted some separation.
Right, but I think with Gavilon's, I mean, when this was built, it was not for hazardous. And then now that Gavilon is their next door neighbor said that they don't want it, I think you still gotta have some sort of setback. I mean, there's setbacks for other things in the county. I don't understand how you will not have a setback for something like this, I guess.
Well, I'm saying you can have a setback. The little bit of difference is this, is one is storage of hazardous materials are a conditional use in a highway commercial district.
Right.
So are animal feeding operations. Here in a highway commercial, you traditionally have a mix of commercial activity. In the rural areas where we run into problems, and believe me, I live and breathe hog barns and cattle and so forth, all matter of zoning jobs. You have that mix of residential, industrial farming, like they use, term they use, but I don't like. I'm not saying it's not a direct correlation, but sure, there can be, there's setbacks to, it's what you want. I mean, if you establish a buffer around, but then we have to be careful and so forth, because we have, propane can go boom too. I'm not gonna talk about the chemistry of fertilizers, so do we have 3 buffers in there? Or are we just saying this, we didn't buffer last time when we put it in, Gavilon was built, then wheat growers came in next. Who came in next after Gavilon? Wheat growers, fertilizer, right? And now this is the 3rd grow to the dance. So we gotta be careful not to over-regulate number 3 if we didn't regulate 1 and 2. Not saying you can't do it, but let's make sure if we do it, we are very careful of that, I think.
Well, that being said, right now, you're within an eighth of a mile of the track to ag tech anyway. There was one other thing that I guess I would like to see would be that it would be stated that those are the only hazardous materials that can be stored with butane and propane. So that we don't run into a situation later down the road, that specified what can be stored.
I think we go back in time and we list everything that could potentially be on that property. We wanna list every type of grain, and every type of liquid, and explosive, hazardous, whatever. I want everything clearly defined, since there's no confusion of what can go there.
On ours or everybody's? You don't wanna list every grain, you don't wanna rule that out.
I think just grain and hazardous materials. I don't know what else would come on a rail car. Freight? Can we see freight on rail cars?
See, a lot.
I don't know, that's, picture what comes on a rail, and then do we want that stored there? Wind turbine parts. Seen those, and then I'm trained.
But aren't we just looking at hazardous materials is the only concern
They're
there?
just applying for conditional use for hazardous
Yeah.
materials,
We are.
butane and propane.
That's it, nothing else.
Right, and I just want that specified.
Exactly.
What about potential, containment, if there was a leak?
That would be in
This has been.
would that include an evacuation plan and, qualified contracts to, cap any valve leaks or anything like that, so that
Would
they have a
include all of that.
contractor that's known? You did say you expect 3 to 4 times a week.
They do.
That would be part of your plan also, I think.
And we could request that come to the commission once a month, that they did do them every week, so that we had, if there was any potential to, I guess there.
Would we want to turn that into the county, to the commissioners, or would we want to turn it into emergency management?
Or somebody
Well,
would have to come and check.
the more it's turned into emergency management, then if there
It
was a
could be
problem.
Catherine or the commission, as long as it's turned in, and
That's
So-
a whole,
designate that too.
Okay, and then that still, that kind of falls in, under the records
accessible by the county. That was one of the things we already had in there.
It's a mandatory reporting or something to that effect.
As I'm looking at it, we've got about 9 things. We got the insurance and bonding, with the county named. We've got the FRA, regulation on private property, notification of movement, records accessible by the county, and mandatory reporting, traffic, safety, hazmat, a specific hazmat plan, training and continued certification. The only hazmat,
Training to be paid for by the applicant.
right. That butane and propane are the only hazmat stored, and daylight hours for moving on the property. Am I missing anything?
Security gated fenced.
Well, we kinda talked about that, but we didn't.
Let's see, equipment along with that training.
What would a tornado do?
What would a tornado do? Pick them up, twirl them around, it wouldn't necessarily pierce one, depending on what it landed on. They're pretty heavy. So it would take a little bit more. Could pick them up and move them.
I think when you get to that point, you know, you can pull out an awful lot of what ifs. You know,
Like a god, a tornado, like you can't.
a tornado big enough to do that, we'd probably look into a whole lot more problems.
Flood in Houston moved a lot of their cars and so it used to find for it.
Once we got another problem.
Yeah.
Noah's Ark.
Okay, so insurance and bonding, county named, FRA regulations from private property, gate/security, notification of movement, records accessible by the county, mandatory reporting, traffic safety, specific hazmat plan, training and continued certification to be paid by applicant. Propane and butane, the only hazmat stored, and daylight hours for moving.
You know, 10, 10, 10,
Yeah, I think so. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now, okay, if I remember right, our objective here is to see if we can come up with something that's hopefully between everybody. Is that what we're looking for?
Yeah, the other thing you need to do though is you need to go through the ordinance on conditional uses and make sure that complies with all those requirements. So, I don't mind if you put out right. So we're looking at Article 17, Section 1705, conditional uses. And so it says specifically that, you haven't actually, you gave it to him, right?
Well, we have
A through-
1605.
You probably have 1605. I have A through 5. You're mainly looking at A, B, and C.
No, it's A through H. It goes on to the second page.
Oh, okay.
And you need to discuss each of those issues.
Some of these are kind of city in nature, so you need to rule about them, okay? So convert them to how they would look out here versus out there. So,
Ingress and egress to the property is sufficient once gated. There's Iron Horse Drive that goes to the facility, is that correct?
Yeah, East-West Road.
That's the east-west road, that comes off of Oil. I would guess that would provide access to fire protection if needed.
That
Does
could
it have to
be
be
an
in
issue,
better
right
condition?
now, we couldn't get in there if they needed to with the fire truck. There's just too much mud. Might need some more gravel.
This is the,
The actual
Iron Horse Drive or the road?
It's
that
off the end of
continues
that,
on?
It's off the
What?
end of it.
west end of it, where it goes at the end of the Iron Horse Drive and where it goes into the actual.
Into their facility.
Correct. It's black dirt.
Okay, so we would wanna require that they gravel or.
So we could put that in with the gate/security, accessibility.
But that's a county road.
Yeah, I nurse,
No,
that
it's
is
a
the county road.
facility.
Oh, it is,
I
yeah.
believe, isn't
The county, took that road. They built it up, the county,
Iron Horse
took it
Road
over
ends
for-
at the storage yard.
I believe for what you guys applied for to get that road, the county had to take it over, so we agreed to take that half-mile road after you guys built it, so. So then the county needs to fix that road.
No, we can
The
get
road
it-
is
we can
fine,
get
it's
it
the,
on
once
Iron
you
Horse
get
Road.
past, get to
It's
their facility,
on their property.
you can't go anywhere once you get to the end of
It's
the road.
on their property.
Like, right at the end of the gravel, then it,
Oh, okay.
it's down.
So then,
There's,
we're back to where we were, gate/security, accessibility.
Their appropriate road.
Are you looking?
you basically, once you get to the end of Iron Horse Drive, you know, and onto the actual property, I mean, it'd be a good security thing, 'cause you couldn't get there if you wanted to. You know, on the flip side of it.
You can walk it, but you can't
You
drive.
can walk it, but I mean, as far as having, if there would be a situation or circumstance, it would be impossible to access it with anything except a four-wheel drive.
Right, and that's.
Currently.
And that's what we need, is part of the emergency management, is to be able to access that.
Correct.
When you say gate though, I mean a gate at the end of the road, or are you saying,
At the property line.
Entry.
I would guess you kind of got an approach there.
oh,
and-
okay, I didn't know if you
and
meant
there
like
would
gate all the way around, or?
No.
Okay, okay.
Gates don't stop people. Just slows them down.
Catherine, what conditions make it low then?
What conditions make it blow?
Yeah.
Well, there's several different conditions. Mostly it would be if it was hit with something and it was pierced with like, a gun, which would have to be a pretty big one, a gun. If a semi were to hit it and the semi started on fire, you could start the tank on fire. It doesn't just blow for no reason.
Mostly pierced.
For what it's worth, I'm probably the only person in the room who talked to somebody who had to deal with a happens to have a hole in a pressurized tank car. And this is a 14-year-old boy took his college job and shot a moving tank and see what happened. Surprisingly enough, it did. Tank car got to its destination, nothing in it. But you see, you also have to have a spark. Only takes one spark. When the bullet went through the tank, it then disappeared right into cold liquid. And of course stayed there. but there was no fire. It was clean, you know, it was squirting liquid, in this case propane, as it went on down the track. But fortunately, there was no fire. But that's $50 worth, in fact, one of the spread operation. That's what it takes to punch our But, it's just a safety valve failure,
But what if-
switching into water.
What a real water even got to there, I mean, if they got a 2-inch line,
Car,
you know,
safety valve is not shut.
I'm sure it'd be whatever's going through.
What is it, water to that?
Stop being the draw, if they would come by right of this.
And,
Runs is full.
and,
But I wouldn't be that bad, wouldn't make them put in fire.
Okay, I have another question. And I kinda go back to where I was before. And I'd asked about containment. And, we talked about the propane, the butane, would just evaporate the air. But what about the
And at
propane?
the end of the hall.
All right.
Will that go on the ground, or will that evaporate too?
That's a gas as well. It's like opening up your
Liquid propane, all right?
It'll be a gas, but it'll go down.
It'll go down, it's heavier.
It's heavier than air. Mr. Chairman, if I might add, one thing about butane is it stays a liquid when it gets down to about the freezing point of water. So it won't, it will evaporate over time, just like water does. Propane is a much lower temperature before it stays a liquid. So whenever a propane tank gets opened up, it will vaporize. But butane is kind of tricky because you can in fact get a leak and have a puddle underneath the car. Now, the access to LPG tank cars is always at the roof. There is no bottom valve on those for safety reasons. In case the car derails, scrubs across the ground, you don't want to snap the fitting off the bottom of the tank car. But the risk is that if safety valve fails, it's very uncommon, but they do. And but the bottom line is, in the wintertime, when it gets cold up here, the butane will remain liquid. Now, is that good or bad? Probably depends on your point of view. A big puddle, if it does reach an ignition source, a vapor plume. You see, the problem is that you've got this location, the predominant wind, is from the northwest. So if you ever do have a leak, that gas plume is going to go across the interstate. Now, if it's diluted enough in the atmosphere, it won't combust. I can't say how much distance propane has to travel before it's safe.
I'm sure none of us can.
Yeah, and so it's always, it's a concern. As he Toby said, 99.9%, make their trip safely. It's that other 0.01 that, that's what risk management deals with.
Well,
And so,
2 months ago, how many people were said an Amtrak train crashed? 3 of them within a week or whatever.
yeah,
It can happen.
yeah. Well, that's what, risk management, right here.
And on your question, you have to keep in mind that none of these tank cars are going to be filled or emptied in the storage yard. That's where a lot of problems occur. These are going to be brought in already filled. So none of that will be being filled and emptied in the storage yard. So that's a little.
Where does that take place?
At the companies, refineries.
My understanding is, Most butane,
Are there any utilities on
most
site?
butane is used.
The water goes to Wheat Growers Building,
But
and
the rest of the year, it's
the
basically.
electric
kind of
runs down,
byproduct that
we
you
brought
sell.
it down partial down the
So
road.
they store it in tank
So
cars. All to do is.
the water sewer
until
would
the
end
late
at,
fall.
Wheat
And then
Growers.
it moves
So
to
on the
plant.
site, there are no utilities.
Yeah. Chairman, you're having a lot of discussion out here,
Right.
which is
Yeah, I'm
fine,
sorry.
but you need to focus on the
Right.
zoning ordinance requirements.
Right. And I think that's what we were just asking about water, right?
I was just asking if there are any utilities on the location, which there are not, so that
Okay.
B is probably not an issue. C, refuse and service areas. There's really nothing that involves, human beings or waste or anything like that, so there would be no need for that. Screen and buffering, I believe we've discussed that. I don't think there's any need for screen. Signs, proposed exterior lighting, with reference to glare, you're not proposing any lighting at the facility?
It was,
Is there lighting at the facility? No, there's no.
there is
lighting.
none, cause there's no electric that runs down there.
So there'd be no glare to affect traffic safety or anything like that. Required yards and open spaces, Clint said that they do comply with highway commercial yardages.
Right.
Last item is general compatibility. It's always good.
I'm surprised the federal government isn't involved. I mean, interstates are federal highway. I mean, it's state, but it's federal as well.
I'm guessing that DOT people drove up and down that interstate when there was butane cars just sitting there, I would think.
They're very aware of the situation.
DNR did come, the federal government knows and they are in compliance.
Okay. Yeah.
Are you satisfied you've discussed all of the?
Well, I got one. Does, how's Egg-Terra, how do they stand on this? They just sent you,
We really haven't even had, nobody from up above has really had said anything about it. We actually, one of our guys called in because we've seen the zoning deal, so none of the management that I know has said anything about it. Yay or nay, either.
And this was sent to who? Was it sent to,
All property owners within a mile.
but was it sent to Kimball or was it sent up above that?
Should have been the main office,
Yeah, that's what I said. I'm sure it was sent to the main office. We,
Okay.
just like Gavelon went there.
I was in the office today.
What's that?
I was in the office today. They knew about it.
Oh, okay.
So at this point, you have a couple options. One is approve it. 2, approve it with conditions. 3, deny it. Or 4, table it.
Maybe clarify then when it goes to the commission for the Board of Adjustments, they then can also have, these are your recommendations, but they can then also have other conditions, correct?
Yes,
So if we come across something as we're tackling these 10 items, it might be, hey, we need to get to that one before we go to the Board of Adjustments, so we have it, knowing that it could come up there too.
Well, the Board of Adjustment hearing is gonna be on a set schedule in relation to this. That's what the ordinance provides.
But they can add to it.
They
if-
can
if
add
we-
to it. The Board of this is a recommendation.
Correct.
The Board of Adjustment can do anything. They will have the same four choices all over again.
Mhm.
They can accept it, they can accept it with conditions.
Correct.
They can deny it. Yeah,
and if a motion to table is made, just give a reason why, and the reason is you don't have enough information.
This would be my recommendation to you, is that if we approve this with our broad range of conditions that we come with,
Mhm.
I think I would take, if I were you, I would take those conditions and I would come to the Board of Adjustment with a plan of how I'm gonna meet 1, 2, 3.
Exactly.
And you give us your plan of what you're going to do, and then we will decide whether those are acceptable conditions to give the approval, if this is done. Because I don't think you should get there and say, we're going to develop this. You know, tell us what you're gonna do, you know, 'cause that would be my recommendation.
Well, and then, once it's decided, I mean, and it's up to you, I mean, you can decide it, and then say the applicant, we want this, 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 and this. So they can't do anything or move any rail cars until they present the required information to the zoning administrator, and at that point, when he decides that you've met the requirements set forth by the Board of Adjustment, at that point, you can move rail cars. So at that point, it's up to the applicant how fast they move, you know, to get the stuff to you.
Right, and the Board of Adjustment has that option to.
So do you, but yeah, they do.
Okay, so we went through all of our conditional use.
when you've decided you've discussed it enough, then it's incumbent on somebody to make a motion.
So my cheat sheet on number 9 is the motion and vote. This is kind of how it has to go around.
And then, I'm just gonna say, summation of discussion is,
You will basically say, if you make a motion, I would like you to say, motion to approve, if that's what it is, due to the fact that the applicant complies with A, B, E, you know, through H, and say what part, how they comply with each one of those. And then also with the requirement of the following conditions. So that's a long motion. But that you need it all written down, because we want no confusion when this is all going to the county commissioners.
okay. So then, if you make a motion, or somebody makes a motion for yes with conditions,
Well, let's talk about all your alternatives, just so you have an idea. He gave you the form of the motion to be if it's granted. If it's granted with conditions, you do what he said and you list all the conditions of your recommendation. If it's to deny, you don't just say deny, you give the reasons referring to the enumerated elements in the ordinance. Okay, if you're gonna table it, you basically can table it because you don't feel that adequate plan has been presented to you. Or you want more information at a later date.
Did you all understand that?
Yeah.
Yes, so someone needs to make a motion.
So, here we are, someone needs to make a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that we accept and move forward with this on the conditions that were stated, already listed, and that they are met with the Board of Adjustments approval at a later date. That time-wise is not right.
No,
I didn't think it was, but.
no, I would just say, as the state's attorney said earlier, you know, the county commission can change things a little bit. So
Right.
basically, you're saying, I make a motion to approve the application for conditional use, provided the applicant complies with the conditions as set forth tonight,
Right.
as well as, and then we have to go through A through H, here, on your handout. And you felt that ingress and egress is okay to the property. You've addressed that satisfactorily. Parking and loading is not an issue. So B, not an issue. C, refuse and service areas do not
Not
apply.
an issue.
Correct.
Utilities are not there, they're not an issue. Screening, buffering is kind of an issue, but that was addressed. Correct?
You tell me how it was addressed.
It was addressed to be,
One of the conditions.
it is one of the conditions stated.
There we go.
Signs, if any, are appropriate, and I don't think there's gonna be any more signs than there are now, which I would think. And all the required yards and open spaces would apply to setbacks, that is all in compliance. And H, the last one, would be general compatibility with applicant properties, or adjacent properties, I'm sorry, and other properties in the district, which is the big one. And I'm gonna say the way it is right now, I am in favor of that one. That's just with that.
So it's compatible as a highway commercial use?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, motion's been made.
Who second?
Okay, now this one we need a roll call vote on. So, all in favor?
Call the name.
Dick?
Aye.
Feldman?
How about Coon's owner?
Oh, sorry. Nay?
You're in trouble now.
Joel, nay? James?
Yes.
Aye. Me, aye. Mike? Lynn? Aye.
Rich, aye.
Deb?
Aye.
Aye. Motion's been approved.
Okay, now we're number 10.
Okay, the availability of the documents for for public inspection. The next step in the process, will be legal notice, and then it'll go on to the county commissioners. Announced Board of Adjustment hearing will be April 3rd, 2018. Planning Commission's recommendation is a recommendation body only, and, County Commission, Board of Adjustment has the decision authority.
That's, ask them if the parties can meet that deadline for the Board of Adjustment.
Can the
Because
parties?
it really has to be, that information should be to them 10 days in advance. I don't know, when do their packets go out?
They go out the week before,
So,
They mail them out the Friday before,
Friday before they.
which would be the 30th.
So can those parties meet that date?
If not, the Board of Adjustments can table it because it's still a hearing at that time for them, correct?
right.
If we go, if that, what?
If it doesn't get met, then it'll be,
We've got the public
It'll be
hearing
the third
requirement.
For this
Yeah.
one,
What?
yeah.
But
now it's a public hearing for the County Commission.
No, but if
Oh, they hear the public hearing and then table it?
they hear it, then they table it.
Yeah,
Written
You're
findings of
correct,
this
they can
board.
take it under consideration.
Yeah.
it'll go in the permanent record. Yeah,
But there doesn't have to be,
we don't have to name,
we don't have to send something to them.
you can ask for when we're done, but
I would say we'll continue for April 3rd. More than likely, we'll be asking you to table it. We wanna do it right, but at least in the public hearing has met in case something else comes up, and at that point, it may take another month to come back. What time do you guys meet in the morning then?
9:30.
I get one thing left.
Need a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion.
Hold.
All the exhibits will go to the auditor's office.
Okay. I'm under the understanding that all the exhibits will be at the auditor's office. That's where it'll be for public inspection.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All against? Motion carried.